Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles. It's Friday, July 11th, and I'm sitting here with my second cup of coffee. Um, it's a bit later in the day than I wanted to start it, but I have a bunch of things I was bringing together. And so I was just, as I always do, once I kind of get into this, I used to try to start pulling things, but finalizing things in the morning before I do my second cup of coffee. And I just kept finding more things and listening to some more news articles. And so finally, I'm like, I just have to get on and talk about the stuff I want to talk about. So today, we're going to talk about Trump's illusory quest, his delusional quest to win the Nobel Prize for Peace. And if you noticed, it was earlier this week that Benjamin Netanyahu nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm going to dive a bit more into that story and talk about what's really behind Trump's drive to win the Nobel Peace Prize and talk about why this is an absurd idea. But anyway, before I begin, let me do like I always do and acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. It's now called Washington, D.C. My people call it Washington. But the Piscataway are the nation, the people that were living here before Columbus got lost at sea. And they're still here. So I want to acknowledge the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbling it is to be living, breathing, moving, living on these lands today. So my Piscataway relatives, Yá'át'ééh, thank you for your stewardship of these lands. Before we jump into the story about Trump's illusory quest for the Nobel Prize for Peace, I want to talk for a moment, and I see Beth and Shantina are both on. Yá'át'ééh. Yá'át'ééh, hello, my relatives. Thank you for joining. It's good to have both of you on right now. I know there's other people who are watching, but I appreciate everyone who joins me for my second cup of coffee. I hope your second cup is just as good as mine is. But before we get into the stuff about Trump and the Nobel Peace Prize, I want to talk about a story that's been going on for the past week or so. I'm not sure exactly when it came out, but I'm going to put a link into Native News Online in here. Ann Cutler, who is a right-wing pundit, and anyway, she made a response on social media last week, essentially after an event regarding decolonizing. She said, "We didn't kill enough Indians." And this didn't really make national news, at least not that I saw. But especially with an Indian country, there were a lot of people, friends of mine and other news organizations and outlets that were protesting and decrying her language of "we didn't kill enough Indians." Obviously, she's talking about the ethnic cleansing and genocide this nation did as it worked to complete its self-proclaimed manifest destiny. Obviously, she would have been a big hero not only of the things like the Trail of Tears, but also the Long Walk. She would have been a great hero of Abraham Lincoln and the work he did to ethnically cleanse these lands. And so rightfully, a lot of people protested and pointed out that they were disgusted by these words and they were not appropriate. And this is not something that we should be celebrating or talking about anymore. And I absolutely agree. Her thoughts and words are despicable, and she absolutely deserves to be rebuked for them. But the reason I didn't jump right on this like so many other people did is because, yes, what Anne said, and she is a far right-wing pundit who is trying to do her best to get clicks and likes and raise controversy whenever she can, while her words are absolutely disgraceful and disgusting and need to be condemned, we as a nation still celebrate genocidal leaders like Abraham Lincoln. And no one calls that out on a national stage. Not no one, very few people. And so while it's important to point out and decry the despicable words by people like Ann Cutler, we also need to decry and point out and say, hey, let's stop celebrating Abraham Lincoln. The man was a genocidal leader. He was a blatant, unapologetic, self-proclaimed white supremacist, one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history. He was intentionally, ethnically cleansing the northern, central, and southern routes of the Transcontinental Railway. His administration oversaw the Long Walk, the hanging of the Dakota 38, the Dakota Wars, and the removal from Minnesota. He was commander-in-chief of the army that committed the Bear River Massacre as well as the Sand Creek Massacre. Right? So let's not pretend that rhetoric like this is just the right wing, and let's not decry it only when the right wing says it. Yes, we need to decry it, but let's call out national heroes on both sides of the aisle who say and do things that are despicable towards marginalized peoples of color, and especially Native peoples and African Americans and women, which are the three basic biases and racism and sexism that this nation was absolutely founded on. And so, yeah, this is why I didn't jump on this immediately. It needed to be pointed out and condemned. But Anne is not the root of the problem by any stretch of the imagination. Our national adoring of Abraham Lincoln is a much deeper problem. Our Declaration of Independence, which we just celebrated as a nation last year, calling natives merciless Indian savages, is a much deeper problem. Our Constitution that specifically excludes natives, calls never mentions women and counts Africans as 3/5 of a person, is the problem. Our Supreme Court case precedents that as recently as 2005 used the doctrine of discovery as a legal precedent for land titles are the problem. And Cutler is merely a symptom of the problem, and a convenient one. But if we're going to call out one side, we need to call out both sides and stop pretending that racism, sexism, and white supremacy is a bipartisan problem, because it's not. And so I want to remind us of that, because we literally just had a national holiday a week ago celebrating a declaration that refers to Native peoples as merciless Indian savages. So you might even say, I'm not even going to go there, but yeah, this is the problem, is we call it out when it's convenient, but we're not nearly as vocal when it gets to the heart and the foundation of what this nation was actually built on. And that's where the problem really lies. So anyway, my relatives, that's just one thought, but I wanted to mention that because that's absolutely been what's been going on. But I want to talk about what's been going on with Donald Trump. And I'm going to share this story. I have several links I'm going to share, and I have a lot of content here, and we're going to have to go kind of quickly because I can tend to go a little long on some of these. But in the news last week, it was noted that Benjamin Netanyahu nominated Donald Trump for Nobel Peace Prize. And the AP article went into, yeah, you can nominate someone, but then it's a very secretive process about how that nomination comes to light, and or how the actual recipient is chosen, and what all goes on behind the scenes. And it actually explains it pretty well. And then, of course, right, we all know about that or at least I talk about fairly frequently, that Donald Trump displays many of the characteristics of someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder. Obviously, I can't diagnose him, but he absolutely does display many of those characteristics and symptoms. And the problem with Donald Trump is he is so receptive to flattery and to just being buttered up. And so, of course, I'm going to share this article in the New York Times talking about how this is just another example of leaders understanding how you get what you want from a president like Donald Trump. You just say nice things about him, and you nominate him for prestigious awards, and you just pretend like he's the greatest thing in the world. And that's what happens. Or that's how you do it. That's how you play. That's how you get your way with people like Donald Trump. Just so we are looking at it from both sides of the aisle, this is the story that ran on Fox News. It was titled "Netanyahu Surprises Trump." I hardly think it was a surprise. With formal Nobel Peace Prize nomination during historic White House meeting. And the reason I say it was probably hardly a surprise is, and again, this is another article in Time magazine talking about, again, flattery is how you get your way with Donald Trump. And this is just what leaders have figured out, and they know how to play him and are doing it pretty well. Elon Musk, right? He bought his way into Doge for just $250 million, and he was able to become Trump's best friend for at least a few weeks or a few months while he went around and did a lot of his business agenda to try to clean out competition for himself. And then now he's gone on his own way, and he's going a separate way. And so, yeah, this is just how you get on Trump's good side. There also was an article in the New York Times that I'm going to share with you. And this is an article about Donald Trump's obsession with winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And this is the article I want to talk a little bit more about, because this gets into why Donald Trump is so obsessed with winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's because he is hyper competitive and gets his self-worth by beating other people. That's how he gets his self-worth. And he can't stand the fact that our nation's first Black president won the Nobel Peace Prize. He can't stand the fact that Joe Biden beat him in an election in 2020. Right? Those things just make him go crazy. And so he is obsessed with, not only has he won the presidency and now won a second term, but he is intent on proving that he is better than Joe Biden and better than President Obama. In this article in the New York Times, it says, for nearly a decade, Trump has publicly and privately complained that he has yet to win the prestigious prize. He has mentioned the award dozens of times in interviews, speeches, and campaign rallies dating back to his first term. And as he presses for ceasefire deals in Ukraine and the Middle East, current and former advisors say the award is looming large in his mind. In many ways, Mr. Trump's public jockeying for the prize reflects his focus on accolades, praise, and acceptance, and a burning desire to best his predecessors. President Barack Obama won the prize less than 9 months after taking office in 2009 for confronting the great climatic challenges, a decision that elicited worldwide controversy. Now I want to talk about this, because this is actually where it gets interesting. If you will remember, 9 months into his presidency, President Obama, our nation's first Black president, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace. And it created a lot of controversy because President Obama, aside from getting elected, had not done much yet, especially on a national or even a global stage. And there was a lot of murmuring about why was he getting this award and what was this award for. And so there was a controversy of that. And I'm going to talk about President Obama and even how he accepted that award and his speech that he gave. But I want to go on with this article because as it goes on to describe Trump's obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize and with President Obama, it says in the final months of his 2024 campaign, Mr. Trump repeatedly invoked Mr. Obama's Nobel Peace Prize, complaining that he did not deserve the award. And Trump went on to say, if I were named Obama, I could have had the Nobel Peace Prize given to me in 10 seconds, Mr. Trump said during a speech at the Detroit Economic Club in October. And this is where it just gets absurd. And on one hand, well, the problem, Mr. Trump, is if your last name was Obama, and if you were indeed Black, I can promise you, you would have never been elected president. You would have never been elected president. You would have never been allowed to say the things that you say and to do the things that you do if you were anything other than a white landowning male from the upper echelons of the 1%. People of color on the United States national stage are not allowed to talk like you talk. We're not. There is no way you would have been elected if your last name was Obama, and if you were Black. President Obama had to prove himself in so many ways that you cannot even pretend to be as skilled or as eloquent or as gifted at. And so this just goes to show how literally blind Donald Trump is to the dynamics of race in this country. Now, in 2015, the Nobel secretary at the time when President Obama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, 6 years later, he expressed regret for giving the prize to President Obama. And it was controversial, again, because it was awarded at the beginning of his presidency. He was just stepping onto a national, even a global stage. He had not done much yet, aside from getting elected. And so there was a lot of controversy and question around why is this award being given to President Obama? Now, as any person of color or other person from the margins can attest to, getting to a position like President of the United States as someone who comes from the margins is absolutely a notable achievement and requires an incredible amount of hard and diligent work, which makes President Obama's response to the controversy and to winning the prize very remarkable. I'm going to share with you the transcript and the video of his acceptance speech, or the lecture he gives. They give a lecture after they are awarded the prize. And this is from the White House archives, the Obama's White House archives. It's the remarks by the president at the acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. And I want to just read a few parts of this speech for you, because early in the speech, he addresses the controversy. I actually watched the speech this morning. I did not watch it. At least I don't remember watching it back in 2009. So I watched it this morning. It's like a 37-minute speech. And it blew my mind how both aware and humble and thoughtful and graceful President Obama was. Again, early in his speech, this is what he said. And yet I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the considerable controversy that your generous decision has generated. He's addressing the people who awarded the prize. This was a pause for laughter. In part, this is because I am at the beginning and not the end of my labors on the world stage. Compared to some of the giants of history who received this award, Schweitzer and King, Marshall and Mandela, my accomplishments are slight. And then there are the men and women around the world who have been jailed and beaten in the pursuit of justice, those who toil in humanitarian organizations to relieve suffering, the unrecognized millions whose quiet acts of courage and compassion inspire even the most hardened cynics. I can't argue with those who find these men and women, some known, some obscure to all but those they help, to be far more deserving of this honor than I. But he doesn't end there. He goes on and says, but perhaps the most profound issue surrounding my receipt of this prize is the fact that I am the commander-in-chief of the military of a nation in the midst of 2 wars. He goes on and says, we are at war and I am responsible for the deployment of thousands of young Americans to battle in a distant land. Some will kill and some will be killed. And so I come here with an acute sense of the costs of armed conflict, filled with difficult questions about the relationship between war and peace and our efforts to replace one with the other. This is just in the beginning of his speech. And then he makes a very profound and very, I would even say, moving speech about the horrors of war, as well as the reality and what he would also name at times the necessity of things like war. And even if you don't agree with everything that he says, which I didn't, I was incredibly impressed with not only how he humbly acknowledged even he felt he did not deserve this award yet, but then used that position and that honor he was given to advocate for something I would say he very deeply believed in, and even at times to challenge his own nation with what we have done. And so, yeah, if you've never listened to this speech before, I would encourage you to listen to it. I'm going to put the video up. This is from it's on YouTube. It's from the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's the video of the speech that he gave. And I watched it while I read the transcript, and they're both pretty much word for word. But yeah, I encourage you to read and or listen to this speech, because it's a very thoughtful response to the political as well as the national and global realities of 2009, acknowledging not only that was he not personally in a position he felt to receive such an award at that time, but he was in a role that also raised a lot of questions in his mind as the commander-in-chief of the United States military that was currently at 2 wars back then, to also be receiving that award. I found it to be a very inspiring, a very moving speech. And I want to contrast that with the remarks that President Trump has made, especially regarding the conflict in Gaza. And it's the conflicts in the Middle East that Netanyahu nominated him for war. Conflicts where not only is Hamas doing horrific things with their weapons, but the nation of Israel is doing horrific and even unspeakable things to civilians with their weapons. And Trump is in the middle of all that. The United States is in the middle of all that. And in the midst of all of that conflict, last February, Trump came out with the idea of removing all the Palestinians from Gaza and turning it into a luxury resort. He is literally pondering ethnically cleansing this land of people who have been there for thousands of years and turning it into a resort for people like him. This is why I call this an illusory quest for the Nobel Peace Prize. Trump is not advocating for peace. He is not advocating for the acknowledgement of the humanity of all people. And he's being nominated for the Peace Prize by someone who is leading a military that at this moment is literally killing thousands, tens of thousands of civilians. This is a delusional quest by Donald Trump. And the people who are playing to him, whether it's GOP senators and Congress members, whether it's people like Elon Musk and Benjamin Netanyahu, they look so completely out of touch. And I would even use the word pathetic in the way that they are propping up a man, an emperor, who clearly has no clothes on. I want to pause here for a moment for what I'm going to call a common memory moment. I want to do these a bit more frequently in my presentations. Something where I share some thoughts or a paradigm I have on these events that connects what's going on to our nation's history. And I remember thinking this back in 2009 when the world was questioning why President Obama was being given the Nobel Prize for Peace. And I remember the conclusion that I came to back then was I concluded the Nobel Prize for Peace, actually, President Obama was not the intended recipient. Again, he's absolutely correct. Not only was he just stepping onto a global national stage and had not done much yet, but he was the leader of a nation that was in the midst of 2 wars at the time. Now, was his stepping onto the stage significant? Absolutely. He was our nation's first Black president. Did that take a lot of work and effort on his part? Absolutely. Did it take a lot of work and effort on our nation's part? Absolutely. The challenges that had to be overcome to elect our nation's first Black president was absolutely seemingly insurmountable. And one of the things when I ran for president in 2020 was I was adamant in my mind. I did not want to be labeled as the first this or the first that. And white people especially love to say things like introduce people like this is our first Black leader of our company, or this is the first Black president of our nation, or this is the first, and people on the left-leaning side like to do it even more than the people on the right-leaning side. Both sides love to do it. But what I realize in that is what they're acknowledging is not the accomplishments of what the person from the margins had to overcome to get there. But they're acknowledging that they, the white organization, the white institution, the white country, put them there. They're acknowledging their own efforts. Look at us. We've elected our first black president. Look how great we are. And the fact that we are having these types of celebrations in the 21st century, well into the 21st century, is absurd, right? There have been black leaders in nations around the globe. There have been women leaders in nations around the globe. There have been indigenous leaders in nations around the globe. It's like our country is thinking they've done something special or unique just because the white people here finally decided to allow a person of color to sit at the same table as them. That's not an accomplishment, white people. At least not for you. It's not an accomplishment to cease being racist and sexist and white supremacist. Does it need to happen? Absolutely. But is it something you get praised for? No. The example I've used before, it's like if a child just refuses to wipe their butt after they use the bathroom and makes their parents do it into their teenage years, even into adulthood. And finally, at the age of 25 or 30, they finally decide to start wiping their own butt. And they start praising themselves like this was some amazing accomplishment. Look at me, I can now wipe my own butt. It's like, no, this is something you should have learned to do a long time ago. It's actually embarrassing that you're learning how to do this at 25. Was it important you learned it? Absolutely. Are we glad you learned it? Absolutely. Is it something you get to be proud of? No. And so the Nobel Prize for Peace, I felt in 2009, was not an award for President Obama. It was an award to the white landowning men of the United States of America. That's who the recipient for that award was. They were congratulating the white landowning men who wrote our racist and sexist Declaration of Independence, who wrote our racist and sexist Constitution, who have to this day racist and sexist and white supremacist Supreme Court. This was an award for them, saying, great job, you finally let a black man be your president. So Donald Trump, guess what? If you use that paradigm, you've already got your Nobel Prize for Peace. And that's the best chance you have at getting one. Because, Mr. President, you are not a man of peace. You are not a man who seeks peace. Your policies are inconsistent. Your words are inflammatory. Your vendettas and your retributions are evil. And your quest for the Nobel Prize for Peace is delusional. My relatives, we are in the midst of a lot of crisis right now. This morning, I read an article about some more ICE arrests in states like California. I see posts like this frequently. I talk with friends who are in the middle of a lot of these spaces. And these stories are breaking my heart. The way that masked ICE agents are going into businesses and courthouses, are standing outside and arresting people, deporting them without any sort of opportunity for them to defend themselves or to state their case flies in the face of what this nation has said it stands for so many years. And it's embarrassing that this is what we've gone back to. Again, this isn't new. This nation was founded on racism, sexism, and white supremacy. Our actions aren't new. The fact that we're so comfortable doing them in public and blatantly, that's a return to how we used to do things back in the 40s and 30s and 40s and even prior to that. So we have a lot of work to do, my relatives. One of the things I'm doing is I am on what I call my common memory tour. And this is my work to counter the narrative that's coming out at the national level. And it's not just the dehumanizing, blatantly abusive narrative and actions of Donald Trump and the Republican Party, but it's the senseless screaming from the left, decrying that they're the party for peace and they're the party for justice and they're the party for human rights. And that is not true either. We have deep foundational level problems that both parties prop up, that both parties adhere to, that we've never changed. And so what I've concluded is that rather than just protesting what the Republicans are doing and propping up what the left says they're about, I've decided to go back to teaching about common memory. And so I am on what I call my common memory tour. I'm speaking around the country. I was just in Gallup, New Mexico about a week and a half ago. I spoke to a mostly Native audience there about a week and a half ago. I'm traveling tomorrow to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'll be speaking in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee tomorrow evening. Let me give you the graphic for that. But not tomorrow, Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I will be at the Woodlands Gathering in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, which is just outside of Chattanooga. And this is an open public event. It's free to the public. You're welcome to come. If you're in the area, I welcome you to join me at 6 p.m. Eastern time in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee at the Woodlands Gathering. I'm looking forward to being there. And if you want to learn more about my tour and follow it and even support what I'm doing, the reason I'm asking for support is since Donald Trump and the Republicans in our government, I have to say, has gone on a blatant attack on anything related to diversity, equity, or inclusion, my speaking invitations have dried up. Most institutions and colleges and universities and even churches are scared or hesitant to host events that feature speakers like me. It could get their funding taken away. Many individuals still want to have the conversations, but institutions and universities are much more hesitant to bring in people like myself. And so I've decided to go on a tour where I'm fundraising to raise for the expenses and some of my own expenses and honorariums, so that I can offer to bring this to any place. And all they have to do is provide me a space to do the speaking. And again, I've done this in several places. I'm going to Tennessee. I'm actually going to also be in Atlanta, Georgia on Monday, the 14th. That event's going to be a much smaller event. If you're interested in attending the event on the 14th and you're in Atlanta, Georgia, message me. Because that's going to be such a small event, the organizers have had to put a limit on who can all show up there. But feel free to message me. And if you want to just learn more, follow about my tour, or even support it, you can go to my GoFundMe page where I talk about my values and what I'm trying to do and the things that I'm working on. I'm also going to put these events into the chat here, and hopefully you'll see them here on. Oh, those got a little convoluted, but anyway, the information's there. So yeah, if you would like to support the work I'm doing to help bring this message and the speech I'm giving, the lecture I'm giving, I've been curating it for several months now. I'm calling it Christian Nationalism, Creation Stories, and Corn. And I'm looking at how our history of colonization has made a chaotic mess out of our politics, out of our faith, and out of our health. And so I'm giving a presentation called Christian Nationalism, Creation Stories, and Corn, and offering some solutions that we can begin working towards to bring ourselves out of this chaos. And in the midst of that, I'm working very hard to create a more accurate common memory. My relatives, you can also follow me on Patreon if you would like to join me there. I go much more in depth into a lot of these contents. I have Q&As there. I have other presentations that I post there, and it's a great way to follow me as well as to help keep my voice independent. I don't use my social media in a monetized way, but I do use Patreon as a way that people can subscribe to me there and keep my voice independent as I continue to find a way to offer my bipartisan critique dealing with our nation's foundations. My relatives, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I hope your second cup of coffee is as good as mine is. I hope the thoughts and the ideas I present are helpful as you think through how to best wade through the chaotic messages that we're getting on a daily basis. And my relatives, walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Yá'át'ééh and Coulter.